All right, I think we're live right now. Welcome, everyone. Uh, Thank you for joining us. If you are here, if you replay, I hope it's a good time to listen to the conversation about archetypes. Today, that's what we're talking about. And we have an amazing guest, Matt Sturm, the author of the Organic Masculine series, a workbook that connects you with the life affirming masculine that is available to us all. Matt is the host of the Living Cosmos Integral Mystery School, focusing on the evolution of consciousness at the intersection of science and spirituality. And you can find Matt at mattsturm.com. And of last time we talked to Matt, he brought up the sensitivity cycle to us, talking about the harmonious cycle of living and the limitations and blocks that can happen in the movement of that cycle. Um, Matt is about to launch his second book, The Primal Drives. Yeah. And that is about the archetype of warrior. So I would like to start that conversation from there first. Congratulations, Matt. Uh,
Thank you.
Second book. Yeah, I was really happy to and excited to hear and see more of that work in the world. And let's talk a little bit about the archetypes. Why are you writing this book? Is that's the second one in the series, right? The first one was the magician. Yeah.
hmm
Now we're talking about the warrior. What are the archetypes? What brought you to this work? And what's in it for all of us?
Okay, great. Well, let's just start broadly on our topic with archetypes and what are they, and I'll share why I care about them.
Mm.
You know, I grew up in like the scientific materialist worldview. I was like a math major in college. And so what was real was what I could measure and see and feel, the realm of science. And more recently, I studied psychology. I've gone deep into Carl Jung. But I've also gone pretty deep into men's work over the last decade or so, and they all work with archetypes. So these exist outside of our normal paradigm in that you can't feel them, you can't measure them, you can't quantify them. They're not inside of science, so to speak. But we can take a scientific approach, and Carl Jung was a medical doctor, and that's what he tried to do. So, as he was trying to figure out how the psyche works, he was noticing that there are these symbols that show up again and again and again in his dreams, in his clients' dreams, in records of other people's dreams from other cultures. The same symbols keep showing up. So, it's not a culture specific thing, it's not a time frame specific thing. And these same symbols show up in myths and religions and stories. So he was like, there's something here. These symbols seem to be universal. They seem to be in some sort of collective. He called it the collective unconscious. And they exert an influence on every single human. We're all connected to them. So universal. And that's the starting point, is there are these patterns of meaning in consciousness that we can tap into, but also that are tapping into us and that are influencing us. And at the beginning, these archetypes are unconscious. We're not aware of them. And as we start to engage with them, we make them conscious. We bring them into our awareness, and then we can actively navigate how to use them. And this is really exciting for me because as we connect with the archetypes, they bring in these unbounded sources of energy, of creativity, of possibility. And they help give meaning to life. They are actually like the symbolic meaning layer of consciousness in my worldview. So it's literally how we feel meaningful, how we feel that this is important or precious. Um, and then as we tune into them, they inspire us to creativity, to do our work in the world. So I'll just start with that definition, and maybe we can go from there.
love that. I love the scientific approach to non-scientific events and
Mhm.
the bringing of meaning to it. And of course, in ancestral healing and family constellations, we work with the archetypes too. We work with the family archetypes. We bring into, and it's through the feeling. I
Mhm.
tried to use Sandy, who is also present with us here. And Sandy and I have met in the women's circle, been in the women's circle for a while. Um, and it's really interesting how working with those archetypes, one of the first thing that, hi, Cindy, I didn't give you a chance to say hi. um,
So,
the first thing that surprised me is how, as one leads the activation or the meditation, right, in a more understandable language is meditation, and many women sitting in a circle had the same vision, the same symbol
Mhm.
that came in. That was so new to my world of scientific academic education as well. That surprised me, that sparked that curiosity for why is that so? Why is the vision that I am envisioning in front of my eyes is the same? And then there was, the snake and different symbols, and all of a sudden we're seeing the um, and experiencing, and it's not necessarily always seeing, it's experience of and a specific quality of that emotion of feeling. So I don't
Mhm.
know if you want to chime in with what your experience with that work is to kind of give it different perspectives on the archetypes.
I love working with the archetypes. But I do also like working with metaphors, and archetypes are deeper. They're more, I don't know, understandable, I think, to what it is we're experiencing. And so I really love working with archetypes. I love the idea of what you were talking about, the collective intelligence. And when you were talking about that, it is so funny because right before we came on, we were talking slightly because I said, I'm going to put that out there, right? So, what it made me think of is this intelligence that's out there for us to be able to access. And having the ability, like you said, to access certain spots that other people have the same access to, it reminds me, I'm a treasure hunter.
Mhm.
Okay. And I go seeking treasures in all sorts of places, shops, antiques, barns, whatever. And here's one of the things that it brought to mind when you were speaking of this is like sometimes I'll see something on a shelf and I'll pick it up and I'll go, oh my gosh, this is such a great treasure. And I look at it and I go, what can I do with this? How can I do this? And I'm looking at it going, I really like this, but I don't know. I'm going to put it back because I know somebody else will pick it up that is going to do something with it, right? And I kind of see that with the intelligence, the art of the collective intelligence, that there's so many ideas out there, so many things that we can grab and bring in. And there's ideas that we can leave out there and go, oh, that's a great idea. I might come back to that, but it might be for somebody else. Because how many times have we
Mhm.
thought of something and saw someone do it? And I know I'm getting off the topic of archetype, but I wanted to bring that intelligence because it was so important when you said that. It just was a big thing for
Yeah.
me to hear and go, you're right. So many times we're so anxious to grab stuff and keep it to ourselves when in
Mm.
actuality to release those back into the for somebody else to see, so someone else to grab the intelligence or the symbols and leave them out there for us. So I just felt that was important to bring in. It just I didn't want to pass over that because I
Mhm.
felt that was a big, important thing for us to understand is that, like you said, all those symbols in the dreams and all that, how important that is to
Mm.
working with
Mhm.
archetypes and bringing those in. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're sharing, like the concept of synchronicity also shows up. You're like, oh, I was just talking about this, and it reminds me of that. And that's one of those other things that as we get into the symbolic realm, these connections start to happen and the little details start to show up in meaningful ways. That meaningfulness is the archetypal layer. And the synchronicities, when they get stronger, it means we're going deeper into that space within ourselves. Mhm.
Thank you, Matt. Um, we mentioned a little bit outside of this conversation live that the archetypes are the parts of ourselves. It's not just somewhere out there, but it's the parts within us that allow us to connect to something within. What did that work give you as you started looking at it, diving more into archetypes? What did that open up for you personally and maybe in your work as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mythopoetic men's movement started in the 80s, and they used stories, they used myths to, so myth is like the cultural specific trapping that sits on top of the universal archetype, the symbol. So like, you know, the great father, you could call it Zeus, you could call it any other number of religious traditions have a name for it, right? But behind Zeus is the universal great father symbol. So in men's work, and I think this is true for women's work as well, the process of maturation is an archetypal process. And the different roles are gendered. So we go in men's work, boy to the heroic warrior, to the man or the king, to the elder. And women have a pathway too. So each one of those is an archetype, and how we transition from one to the other, we go through a process of initiation, or the hero's journey is one of the names for it, which is also an archetypal process. And so when I started engaging in men's work and going through this process and feeling it in myself, it didn't matter if it didn't make sense to my worldview. I was like, there is something here. It is powerful. I am transforming through this work. And then I got really curious. I was like, okay, I'm going to start reading. I'm going to dig in. Yeah. And the more I've studied it, the more passionate I've become about it.
Mm,
Um, my other entryway into this world is through the tarot deck.
mhm.
And again, I didn't know anything about it. I just picked it up and started pulling a card once a day. I kind of found a deck that I liked. And then as I was pulling a card once a day, I was like, these cards are speaking to me. And I don't know why. And it doesn't make sense when, like, you know, probabilistically, like right now, in the last 2 weeks from my deck, I've pulled the same card 3 times in the last, like, 14 pulls. And it's like, what? Okay. That does not make logical sense, but it's relating to what's happening in my life. And so the question is, like, are these cards influencing me? Am I influencing the cards? Or probably is there a deeper level that is influencing all of the above?
I love when you mentioned the great father. Of course, I can relate to it working with ancestors, right?
Hmm.
One of the ways it really helps working with in ancestral entanglement and releasing family dysfunction, releasing family trauma, generational trauma. But when we have some kind of conflict within the family, there's a conflict with the mother, there's conflict with the father, it's really difficult on a human level to see beyond that conflict.
Mm.
Um, it is often much easier to interact and engage into that connection by bringing the archetype, right? There's an archetype of Christ, there's the archetype of the Son, archetypes of the Great Father, right? And when you're looking at and the truth that comes from the soul of the Father wishes well to the child always. The
Mm.
soul of the mother wishes happiness to the child always. When we look at it and engage with it as an archetype of the greater father, the greater mother, it's
Hmm.
much easier to feel into the love and the
Hmm.
love that has that healing effect, that impact. It's easier to bow to the soul, to the archetype of the father. And then from that point, bring it into the human father to receive the love of the human parents and heal that connection and step out of the victimhood
Hmm.
to rewrite, reauthor that story and connect, right? As the whole path goes from disconnection to connection, from rejection and judgment to receiving into the heart. And the power of healing that. And you said, is it that? Is it me? Is it making up? It doesn't make sense. And that field, right? We speak a lot about stepping into the field, the interconnected quantum field that we all somehow can tap into. Like so, like that's why like I love that you describe it. It's on the edge, on where the spirituality and science meet, and you are beautifully using the scientific method approaching that field of spirituality to bring it to explain. And I love that you are saying it doesn't make sense, but because I feel it, I dove into it. Tell us a
Hmm.
little bit more. Tell us that. Tell us.
Great.
I'm craving that knowledge. Give us this materialistic kind of like mind food into what did you find looking at it from the scientific, using the scientific approach of working with
Hmm.
the archetypes.
Well, part of the scientific approach is when we try something, is it replicable? So, like, if I'm here having crazy spiritual experiences doing my meditation practice, but then I say, hey, Vika, try this out, and nothing happens for you, then we have to inquire further. But if the same thing happens for you, then there's like a consistency that becomes reliable. So we're looking at practitioners who are reporting data of their own subjective internal experience. And this is useful in spiritual practice. And it's also useful in psychology and archetypes where we can't put a ruler down, you know, and say, oh, the great father archetype is here in you right now because the light's going off. You know, we can't do that, right? But in your work, like in the circles that I've sat in with you, you'll say, okay, does somebody want to represent, right? And you'll write an archetype, you'll write a symbol on a card and nobody can see the card, but then everybody picks up on it, right? And you were speaking to this a little bit. How is it that when one person creates the intention, I write money on a card and have a human hold it, everybody starts to organize around that? Well, there's a field there, you know. I can't measure that field. I can't tell you it's X bandwidth of radio wave light that we're feeling, but you do it enough times and you say, oh, this is replicable. There is something legitimate happening here. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's like yeah, you give that such a beautiful format. We did work in a circle together, and I remember you were representing the father, right? And that was the blind.
Yeah, I was representing the father. Yeah.
And a very emotional, very tangible emotional reaction of people around the room, right? And bringing in the connection with the father, and sometimes revealing something that was not obvious to the connection with the human father, but was sitting somewhere deep inside and bringing tears, bringing the emotional craving for the connection. So that's definitely something that can be experienced, and that's why I love this work. It's undeniably resonant, right? We use the
Mhm.
language of resonance, or what we call the language of the soul. And for somebody, the word soul may be triggering and like a little bit of in a conflict I'm arguing with. And it's I invite everyone to open up to the possibility of what can be behind it. If this work doesn't work, this word doesn't work for you, maybe use a different word. That's why we're bringing up the word of archetype. Right? What is the archetype? Um, I would love for you to speak a little bit about your series that you are writing as you're going
Oh,
through
sure.
archetypes. Um,
Yeah.
why you chose it? What's the intention behind that?
Okay, great. So, like 3 years ago at this point, um, I went on a pilgrimage to Europe to some sacred sites, and part of that pilgrimage was like, okay, universe, show me what my next work is in the world. What am I here to do now? and the inspiration came through very clearly of like write a book for masculinity, on masculinity. And so I started writing, and the book got bigger and bigger. At first, I resisted it, by the way. I was like, I don't want to write a book. Are you kidding me? But then, like, I finally got on board with it, and I was like, oh, this is actually a lot of fun. And wow, I have a lot to say. Like, there's a lot coming through. So the book got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then finally, I was like, this is too big. I need to split it up. So I split it up into 4 pieces. The first book is published. The second book is coming out in 2 weeks. Magician, warrior, lover, king. So this framework of these 4 masculine archetypes has a good chunk of history with it. Carl Jung posited that there were 4 parts of the psyche, but he didn't use these 4 parts. And then one of his students actually created a feminine version, which is much closer to these 4 parts. And then in the 90s, Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette wrote the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which is kind of a foundational piece of men's work today. So it's common for men's retreats and in men's work. And I find that dividing the psyche into 4 parts makes sense for me, but it's also a very direct and easy way to speak to other people about their experience. So the magician is the part of us that is connected with the intellect. The magician is the thinker, the one who is curious about the cosmos, who is curious about the inner landscape, who wants to learn and become an expert at all of these different kinds of knowledge and techniques. That's our inner magician. Or the feminine version could be the priestess or the witch. There's a number of them. The warrior is connected to the quality of action. So it's about getting out there and getting things done. Boundaries, discipline, deals with the emotion of anger, integrity, purpose, these types of concepts. 50 years ago, in the original feminine version of this, it was called the Amazon for the feminine psyche. Lover is about feeling, so the emotional quality of being, and relationships. The lover is connected to our pleasure. The lover steps into devotion to the other, and eventually the lover steps into devotion to all that is. And then the king, so the gender neutral term for the king would be the monarch, but king or queen. And this is the quality of being, of presence. So the warrior acts and the king is in presence. And the archetype in wholeness is in service to the realm. The king is the first servant. The queen is the first servant. But it's about granting one's blessing. It's about taking care and tending to and being a steward of the resources and the life that is yours to relate with. And so these 4 quadrants of the psyche, we all have them, and we all inhabit them to more or less degrees. And when we are not conscious of them, they can kind of go off track. They can get suppressed. They can become overly active and kind of take over in ways that are harmful. And so the process is to initiate, to wake up each one so that it integrates into the whole mandala of the psyche.
Beautiful, beautifully explained. Thank you so much. It does sound like the process of initiation. I can definitely hear as you're speaking in myself, right, and in surrounding, and I know this needs a little more attention. I know this
Yeah.
this may be a little more balanced, right, and this absolute desire to go in service to the whole, in service, and requires the balance, right? There's also a boundary, but you cannot overdo one. If you do one, you don't receive. Maybe go back to this sensitivity cycle that you were talking about, not feeling rewarded for the action that I'm putting into the world. It's also misbalancing and maintaining this fluid balance as we activate, as we step into, as we serve into the world. receiving and giving at the same time. Receiving is giving, serving is receiving. Um, yeah, that's what comes to mind. Initiation is a beautiful world to more to go
Yeah.
through. As I was, if I take it a little bit to the ancestral family work, there's
Mhm.
kind of movement from the child into the mother, releasing the field of the mother, going into father, releasing the field of the mother, going into life in service of, and from individual, collective, spiritual love, kind of expansion through and
Mhm.
receiving all on the way, right? You can't skip one. You
Mhm.
can really go to spirituality without receiving the parents, the grandparents, the ancestors, and kind of expansion of the circle. Um, yeah, so Sandy, I'm gonna give you a second, maybe if you want to chime in with what comes to
Yeah,
mind. I know a lot of usually comes through you the first time. I want to hear the first
I know, right? No, I love it. I love listening to this conversation and just the explanation of how you're walking through the different archetypes. It really is. It's parts work. And I'm just sitting there
Mhm.
watching this, going, people are like, well, what am I? Am I this? Am I that? I'm like, you're everything. You're
Mhm.
every single archetype. And I loved how you brought that in. So it's like, where am I at right now? Who in me can I reach for to help right now? Do I need this magician? You know, do I need the warrior right now? And how does it show up in me? And that's the other thing I like is doing the parts work. The warrior in me is going to show up differently, most likely, than the warrior in Vika. And and so doing our parts work and being able to step in and not think but feel those archetypes really helps us understand and know who we are. And the other thing I like about the archetypes is that they also flow, like you said, the child, the maiden, or the boy, the warrior, as you go through, those archetypes flow with it. So it's not always the same.
Mhm.
And being able to work in groups like yours and study that and be with that, I think that helps us find how our archetype works within us, being able to be in that with um, other groups, in circle with others, and be able to define our own within the group is, I think it's a really great way to um, embrace those parts of us and again give us grace while we're working, because those archetypes also have the shadows too, don't they?
For
And
sure.
as we step into them, those shadows sometimes can be very difficult to navigate. And working within these groups like what you are offering, I'm excited about that, because I know right now, um, I feel my belief is there's been a wave of women working in this,
Mhm.
and it's just beginning for men. And
Mhm.
I'm so excited to have these offerings, because I feel that it will give the opportunity for men to give grace to themselves, to be actually to feel their emotions, where society was always scoffing at them if they showed an emotion before, right? And so that's what I'm excited about. And I'm just so thankful that you're here,
Mhm.
Matt, to bring
Thank you,
this forward.
Sandy.
Is that why
Yeah.
you started from magician, Matt? It's just open up the curiosity, and
That's
it
right.
reminds me a little bit of like the you want to take out magician. Is like magician is the one who thinks like, oh, okay, that's the alchemist, right? That's the
Yeah, the
desire
alchemist.
to see in the essence of things and transform,
Mhm.
transmute. And of course, I want to ask a little bit the shadows. How did that journey impact for you though? How did the shadows show up? How did you work with the shadows? What happened in your personal journey? What the magician brought in first, and maybe what the warrior already brought in through as well.
Mhm. Yeah. So The archetypes, they're not inherently good or bad. They're just meaningful, and they're vastly more powerful than us, than any individual, because they exist in the collective. So all of humanity is like feeding consciousness in, and then it comes back to us. So sometimes we might get identified with an archetype, meaning I think that the archetype is actually who I am. Ego identification with the archetype. And there's a lot of power in that. So, like, the shadow of the king is the tyrant. We see a lot of men in the tyrant ego identification. We call it grandiosity in the world out there. Um, and when that archetype grabs a hold of you and you get identified with it, then it has its way with you. The humanity and the choice gets overridden by that powerful energy that just starts to take over and flow through. With regards to my path and the magician, let's just like focus in right there. You know, I mentioned that I was a math major in college and I wanted to understand how the universe worked. That's a very magician thing right there. But the magician can kind of get dry and so in the head and so concentrated on the facts and figures. And this is definitely like especially true of people studying mathematics. It gets so far removed from reality that you're off in this other realm of the forms of thought, basically. And so you can get disconnected. Um, there are plenty of other, like the dark sorcerer who gets drunk on power, the performer, like the magician has a performing quality, and so people who perform for attention. Um, Another of the distortions of the magician archetype is the personality pattern. In Hakomi, they call it sensitive and withdrawn, where the world is too much, I'm too sensitive, and I just kind of pull back. I withdraw. All of these, the performer, the sensitive withdrawn, even the sorcerer who plays with power, once we integrate them, they bring gifts. And the process of integrating them, Jung called it individuation. So at first, we're kind of just at the influence of the archetype, and we need to find our individual self. Archetype over here, here's me. And then the next step is to create what's called the ego archetype axis, so that I'm not cut off from the archetypes, but I'm in relationship with them, and that energy can flow into my life in generative, life-affirming ways. And I'm in my sovereign center directing that flow through me. So I can welcome the magician in, and then I can transition out when I want.
It
Love
resonates
that.
so much as I'm listening to you, and if I'm translating into the constellation work, it's the
Yeah,
word
yeah.
ancestral entanglement, right? That I'm stepping in the bigger way, right? I'm not standing at my level of my row of humans. I'm kind of taking on the role of a parent, a grandparent, a great great parent, and I'm expressing their emotions. Like I'm entangled so much that I feel bigger than, and that gives me this internal right to express anger, to express blame, to feel bigger than others. To from the feminine path, it's mother people, right? I may mother my partner. I may try to teach people all the time, and it's
Yeah.
and it's
Grandiosity.
yeah, and it's this the path of letting it go, humbly going into your own path, returning that power back to the ancestor you entangle with, to the event, to the collective something, right? Very often we see war represented in the humans, returning it back to where it belongs. And through gratitude, with honoring that what is the statements of truth, the soul language of truth, um, bowing to releasing, stepping into your sovereign self, and then using this door of access through gratitude, through honoring, that it becomes empowering rather than emptying as you express it, right? There's this kind of shift from entanglement to sovereign being, from depending on codependency, right? And that's how we step out of the codependent relationship, from releasing the entanglement, allowing the truth to come in, allowing to the creator again to come in. And I love that you mentioned the doors, the doors that connect you to that you can source it from when you need it, but not get overpowered by the archetype itself. Beautiful.
Mhm.
Beautiful said. Thank you so much for
This is why I was so excited to talk about archetypes with you, because I knew it would light up your work. Yeah.
very much
So
does.
I have a question for you, Vika, and actually maybe for both of you. In the men's work, we're really focused on initiation through the life cycle. So from the boy to the adolescent, from the adolescent to the adult. And there's like mythic stories and there's process of how we go through each one. And so in my worldview, we live in an adolescent society where we lost our rites of passage. And even though we're biological adults, many of us are still children or adolescents on the inside. And so we need these rites of passage to symbolically step into adulthood. So that's like one of the core reasons to do men's work in my world. And I'm curious, in the family constellation work that you do, is there a maturation process that's connected in some way or parallel in some way to this?
Definitely. One of the patterns that we've been discussing a lot is moving through initiation, right? Into interestingly, in the so first systemic constellation work, that's the going into towards the mother, into the field of the mother, moving away from the field of the mother, right? Releasing, like you said, releasing the ego, releasing the codependence, moving into the field of the father, receiving masculine initiation, boundaries, strength, ability to make decisions, right to your own know, your own sovereignty, safety to express in the world, moving into the life, letting go, releasing, humbly honoring with gratitude, stepping out of the field of the father, walking into life. Interestingly, in the feminine path is also rebirthing, reintegrating and rebirthing, shedding, rebirthing, constant cycle of initiation, but very similar way, initiation into the world, initiation into and inclusion as well. The
Yeah,
process
right.
of expanding, right? And there's the I think there may be the synchronicity in what you were speaking about, releasing the ego, is this contraction, finding the where the ego or that archetype is overpowering you, finding that contraction and releasing, including that as well. I think that may be maybe the parallel, when you including the shadow, grading the shadow, alchemizing the shadow, right? By including it rather than rejecting and judging, but in allowing space into receiving into the heart, that maybe the process of receiving into the heart, allowing, and you mentioned only take it when what serves. So in and I'm not sure if it's feminine way or if it's general way of, there's this take the love, leave the rest. Please take my love, leave the rest. So it's kind of from archetype of the parent, and it's both from parents, mother and feminine and masculine, mother and father goes, and only take what serves you. And in feminine, it's working with the dark archetypes, dark goddesses, right? In feminine, we work a lot with dark goddesses, is releasing or giving, recycling the energy that doesn't serve you right now into the dark goddess as her food. Your waste is her food. It's kind of this recycling in nature. I think it's a lot of working with this circle, this cyclical nature a lot, because it feels like, and that's my more like guessing here. We go through cycles so often, right? Like every month, every night, every month, every season that goes in, and it's what the addition of the feminine part that feels like to the hero journey. I had to describe you coming back into the world. There is rebirthing the world. There's
Mhm.
as you face the dragon, then you embody the dragon, this part of expansion of, rather than or on top of, in addition to facing the fear, stepping bravely to the fear, right? In this, I don't want to say conflict, but there is a little bit of a interaction with, in the women, in the feminine, not that I don't shouldn't use the word women, in the feminine way, there's a lot of expansion, embodiment, giving birth to,
Mhm.
rebirthing into. Sandy, maybe you can add to that, this process. It's really interesting, and it's not.
Yeah, you know, and it's different. It's different for so many different modalities and stuff. And just listening to this, you know, and talking about the men and going through their thing, one of the things that we are doing here in Wild Walker is we're trying to bring those things back to actual tangibly doing them, to be able to bring, I mean, we've even spoken, I was reading this thing where this woman, as an adult, went back and did the initiation of her first moon, her first cycle. And because our society has shunned women's cycles and what happens, and so we've lost that initiations of stepping in from the child to the maiden to the mother, and not having those ceremonies or rituals like they did in the past. And so having them symbolically and in circles and all that is absolutely wonderful and necessary. But what I want to do is bring them back. So as a woman, if you have never, ever been initiated into maiden, let's do that now. And
Right.
let's walk
Totally.
through it. And so that's exactly where I feel that we as a collective need to be, is to get back to that and honoring our own cycles and being able to see them, not be shameful of. But once we have them, they actually are powerful to be able to step into that maiden and not just, like you said, not shrink back, right? To be able to have that ritual and be fully seen as this maiden, not some teenage young adult woman that has to hide everything and cover up, you know. So it's really important. And that's, I love that. I love being able to come back and do those things in person. I'd like to step back and talk about your first archetype that you're bringing forward, the masculine, or the magician.
Mhm.
And when you were talking about that, I wanted to bring forward what I got hit on, because I was like, oh my gosh, I see why the magician is first. It was so important because I have lived in a world of I have been the little man. I have been that. So, because to be in my world, I had to be, right? And so my brain is so turned on. And this is where I've been trying to bring the brain out, bring the flow in, and I've been doing so well with this. But what I find is when the science can connect to the woo-woo,
Mhm.
it aligns so much better, because my brain, I've got to the point where my brain is okay with not knowing and being curious. And it's taken me a while to get to that. But when we can use the science, because I find my magician is also a trickster, and it likes to keep me
Yeah.
safe. And so sometimes my magician is saying, oh, Sandy, don't do that. That's wrong. That's going to get you into trouble, right?
Uh-huh.
And so now I've learned my trickster is one of my best friends. And it's not really
Oh,
a trickster. He's not really trying. He used to try to trick me, but now he doesn't, or she doesn't, whatever. I consider it a male energy. But the magician now is more of my warning. It says, hey, Sandy, remember that was bad before. And I can look and go, oh, you're right. How is it now? Is it going to be safe for me now? And so being able to find those archetypes and that magician and connect
mhm.
it, our brains with our emotions, I was like, that was very clever, because when we don't have that flow of emotion in us, we almost need to see it's okay. Oh, my brain says it's okay. I can feel this emotion. So working with the magician,
Mhm.
allowing us to learn how to relax our brain and have our magician tell us our emotions are okay. So I really loved that. And it just was like, it was a strong hit. You can see I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
I was like, oh my gosh, the magician's the perfect one to start.
right.
And so I'm excited about your series, because
Thank
that,
you.
to me, that tells me that was so inspired
Mhm.
to bring the magician first. Because once we calm that magician and bring him into our what do I want to say, into our quiver of
Right.
tools,
Mhm.
then we're going to be able to open up to these other archetypes with a little more feeling of safety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your excitement, Sandy, is like the perfect example of why I love talking about archetypes, is because it's so immediately relatable for each person. Each person kind of goes to their own place, but we start talking about the magician, and they're like, oh yeah, for me, it's like this and this and this. And then it starts to flow. And that's the magic of myths and symbols and archetypes, is that it's this universal language that we all speak. Yeah.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Matt. I want to answer a little bit more to the question you asked about the rituals from the constellation point of view.
Mhm.
And Sandy, you mentioned the first moon. There's what I'm also trying to bring back into our communities, asking for blessing. A simple ritual that used to be commonly spread, very normal, that I think we kind of got lost on the way somehow. It's asking for blessing. And I return to this, and I rarely quote or go to the Bible, but this ask and you shall receive. That's such a simple thing that goes when you ask, and I'm going to use the word archetype of the mother, right? Or the soul of the mother, archetype of the mother for blessing, you will receive it. But there's this act of asking that's important. And the same for the mother when you ask for blessing. So like you mentioned, we live in this adolescent, maybe even in childhood as a community, as a society, right? And there's a difference that Bert Hellinger marked between the child's love and adult love. When child's love, in many ways, can be self sacrifice. I'll suffer for you, I'll feel that pain for you.
Mm. Mm.
The
Right.
adult love honors everyone's sovereignty and everyone's choice, right? I may choose suffering for myself, but I would never choose to give it to the next generation
Mm.
from the soul, from the highest perspective, right? So this when the child picks up the suffering, when it's so often we repeat the suffering of our parents, right? Because it's
Mhm.
out of love, out of loyalty. Because on the level of child's love, without being initiated into both feminine and masculine path, right? And for both, it's the blessing required, it's the ask and shall receive required, allowing us to step out of victimhood into the creator is letting the previous trauma not try to heal it, not try to fix it, not try to change what happened in the past, but receiving the past as is, honoring the past as a part of the path, that needed to happen for mystical reasons sometimes, the reasons that may or may not understand. And that maybe is the part of mystical role. There's a mystery school. You're running the mystery school, is the feminine mysteries of not everything is logically explained when we look at it from the human individual perspective. It may be explained later. It may take decades, centuries, might never. We don't know. And as Andy said, I'm okay with not knowing right now. It's kind of required pre-qualification to go into this work, releasing, relaxing the brain, but going into moving from the child's love into adult love, where I don't try to save you out of your choice. I honor your choice.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you choose to be addicted. Maybe you choose to self-sacrifice, but I get to honor it and see the greatness of your soul in that choice, and allowing to happen without trying to push, force things out of their natural flow, out of their become the bigger one. They entangled with archetype, they entangled with ancestor, right? And doing the things out of ego rather than allowing to flow through. So maybe that will bring a little bit more clarity of the process of initiation, right? From
Yeah,
child
totally.
into adult. Yeah, I love
Beautiful.
the synchronicities between the work. Love
Yeah,
it.
there's a lot of crossover. You know, for me, I'm deep in men's work, but really men's work is about soul work. It's about helping people find their soul self. And so the archetypes can get in the way. The ego starts running the show, and there's a developmentally appropriate stage for us to be in our egos, to learn how to navigate the world, to have healthy competition, to try to succeed. And then there's another step of, okay, ego can come into service to life moving through me, to my heart, to my soul self. And that's what I hear you speaking to in where is that love coming from and how is it expressing?
Yeah. And bring into awareness, and do you just ask what people do it in person? Matt is running you a men's retreat
Oh, yeah.
soon at the end of March. Do tell us a few words of what that experience is going to be like. Who is invited? Who is it for? Yeah, what's happening with that?
Great. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So we're starting with the magician again.
Mm.
If life goes the way that I'm envisioning it, I will do 4 men's retreats this year around the equinoxes and the solstices. So we'll do magician, warrior, lover, and then king. And so in March, close to the equinox, we're going to do a magician retreat, but it also happens to be lined up when the planet Mercury is passing in between the sun and the earth. And for the ancients, well, Mercury is connected to the deity Mercury, who's the trickster, magician god of the Roman and Greek pantheon. And when the planet moves through this phase between the sun and the earth, that's the most potent time to connect. And so people who were in devotion to Mercury would go on vision quest at that time, and they would do ceremony to call in that energy. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing, I have no idea exactly how the Greeks did that, but we're going to be doing some version of that, have a purification, a vision quest, and then an integration. And it'll be on some private land, beautiful in West Marin, Point Reyes. We're going to be in a rustic yurt on acres and acres of just open land. So there will be yoga, there will be shadow work, which we haven't really gotten into shadow, but one of the main roles of the magician is to connect me with my shadow and navigate the interface between waking consciousness and unconscious. And so part of the initiation that we'll be doing with the magician is to also orient our psyche towards the shadow. And we can never really look directly at the shadow, but we can have it with us, so to speak. So, yeah, that's what's happening. This is my first time doing this particular format of this retreat, and I'm stoked. I'm so excited for it.
Beautiful. End of March, Northern California. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and that's speaking to you, you are invited to come in. That's men only, right? I was like,
Yeah, it's a
I
men's
know it's
retreat.
gonna women are gonna be asking me like, is that for
I
men?
know, right?
Men only. This time it's for men only.
There is, Sandy, you were speaking to this before, right before we got on the call, of having the integrated co-ed retreat experience. And that is a growing edge that's really exciting for me also. I think that there's a phase where men should come together and do men's work and women should come together and do women's work, or, whatever your gender affiliation is. And then there's another phase after that of like, let's integrate. And I call that the village. Let's be in the village together. Um, and there's men doing inner feminine work, there's women doing inner masculine work, but then there's all of us being in the village together, relating and connecting together in ceremony. And I'm not offering that, but that's a growing edge that I'm excited to like lean into. Yeah.
Oh, and that's the thing I see, work. This is where Wild Walker is walking to. This is where we're going, is we want to have that ability. And I'm like all excited going, okay, Matt, we're going to have to build something. And my whole thing here is we're back in nature. We're just trying to get back into the cycle of Mama Gaia. I am off grid. Um, I'm out in the middle of a mountain valley that you have to actually plan if you're going to drive in here. So as you can see, I'm sitting in deep in the earth right now, and I'm feeling her cycles. And this is something that is new to me also, is coming in and learning. Like I said, I've been in the masculine, and so trying to be in the feminine in the best way is for me to go back into the earth, into nature, and start becoming into those cycles. And as I do that, I'm inviting others to come feel this, because this area that I'm in is kind of a sacred land. And I want to say I'm a guardian of it. I'm not an owner of it. I'm a guardian of it right now. And we are calling in a community that wants to do the same, because this is where I think we're going, is the women are doing their work. The men are coming,
We're
and
getting
together. Yeah, you are. You are. I'm excited. And you know what? It's when it's supposed to be. I really do trust that the universe does what it's supposed to do in its time. And we have to observe and be with it, right? That's why I'm back into this. But bringing them together like that, I love that. And I love that you're leaning into that. And that's also something in your probably out in the collective. I'm sure it's there too. I know it is, because we're both on it. We're both
Mhm.
thinking this. And so I'm just going to put out the intention that we will manifest a beautiful group retreat for both men and women in its time that it's supposed to be.
Beautiful.
And so it is. And so it
Yeah.
is.
And I think we'll benefit so much by that, you know. I mean, the men's work, the women's work, we're so individually growing. And so I love that it's now time, as we step into this new way of being, into the Aquarian age, that the next step is to integrate,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
And to learn these next steps in the world together. So
Yeah,
thank you.
definitely hearing this call for the union, for the sacred union, for the sacred dance. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Matt. Thank you both for what a beautiful end. Can we just finish it? It's like ascended to the world, this desire for the village, you call it the village. This union to be, this integrational way of being, the co-creation. Yeah, I feel like that's a beautiful note, not to end, but to pause this conversation. We covered a lot. You heard 2 invitations. The links will be somewhere around the video. So if that's something speaking to your heart, if that's the work you've been looking for, the community you've been looking for, the way of living, being, creating in the world, you're not alone. I think that's the point of this conversation. You're not alone. It's there. It's in collective. People, we are working towards it. Many people are working towards it, and let's co-learn together. Let's send it into
Where
the universe.
and where are we going to find the links to your, what was the website again? Or the links to
Mhm.
your, yes, Matt, to your retreat.
mattsturm.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
All the things are there. Yep.
We're gonna put it under this video too, so it's available to
Mhm.
everyone.
Yeah, and my next book, which comes out in 2 weeks, on the archetype of the warrior, also primal drives. Yeah.
Yeah. Excited about that. All right. I feel like that conversation feels complete for now. How are you guys?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
do that.
Thank you, Vika.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Matt.
Sandy.
Thank you,
Well,
Sandy.
thank you,
Thank you
Vika.
to
Thank
all of the
you.
listeners and viewers and the in any way you are listening or viewing to this. That was beautiful opening, and I'm looking forward to more. See you
I
guys.
really appreciate being invited to this soul conversation. I really am excited about what you're bringing forward. So thank you for the invitation to be here to witness you bringing your new thing forward. I love this.
Yay. New things are in the world. It's happening. All right. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.